All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the February 14th, 2023 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG-Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. For anybody who's new here, that pretty much just boils down to be nice. Let's start with some announcements. The first announcement is that, so we're past enhancements freeze. And the next kind of major milestone for 127 is code freeze, and that is in 1 month from today. I think the only enhancement that SIG-Windows is tracking is part of the work, the ongoing work that Aravin's been doing, and I think we can maybe discuss a little bit about the SIG architecture discussion and the future of that. But code freeze is in effect, or goes into effect for more than just enhancements. So just if there's changes we want to get in, let's work in getting those in. Does anybody else have any announcements? Oh, all right. Next is we usually give some space if there's new contributors who want to introduce themselves or ask any questions to people. Just say hi. It's no obligation to do so, but if you're interested, feel free to do so. So if there's anybody who's new on the call who wants to introduce themselves, say what they're working on, what they hope to get out of the community meetings, please feel free to just unmute and say hi. All right, we can go on to the agenda. I did want to discuss something before we start with these agenda items, and that is I think SIG leadership changes. So for people who know, Aravind has been contributing in the SIG-Windows for a long time. He's done a big help with like a lot of the docs updates, a lot of driving the PR and issue triage, and also working on the node log viewer enhancement for many years. And I think because of his consistent and like ongoing contributions, we wanted to offer Aravind the chance to become a SIG chair. So the SIG leads have already discussed this, and I think we all agree, but part of the process is announcing it publicly, and then there's a short lazy consensus period, and then we can make that happen. So I guess I want to congratulate Aravind on this, and then if anybody has any, comments, concerns, or wants to say congratulations to, please either do so here or reach out to some of the SIG leads individually. One other small change as part of this, the Kubernetes community is trying to be more explicit about the roles for chairs and TLs. So I'm just going to switch I'm going to continue on as a chair, but also mark myself as a TL, which has some slightly different responsibilities as part of these changes, and we have to make these in the next couple of weeks. So, thank you for everything, Aravind.
No, I'm very honored, and it'll be a pleasure for me to take on this role and help you out, Mark. So yeah. Happy to help out as usual, and keep improving things in Windows land.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can move on to the agenda. Looks like there's a lot of congratulations in the chat. Oh, Jay just said on Slack he's joining. Okay, first thing that I want to bring up here, there's a couple of issues. So for anybody who's been building with host process containers, hopefully you need to use BuildKit in order to build host process containers images for Windows, because there's some reasons that are described in some of the issues. Well, recently there was an update to BuildKit that updated the version of the BuildX. Updated the version of the BuildX plugin that's used to build things, which started causing issues where images built with the default values in like the default command line arguments, after upgrading from the BuildX plugin v0.9.1 to v0.10.0, would cause the images to no longer pull if you were running containerd on all versions of containerd, which is very unfortunate. So there's some. Oh, hey Jay.
Hey,
I will. So you were just discussing now. I think I started a thread in Slack last week about these, but just discussing some issues with some changes to the BuildX plugin and BuildKit that cause it so that if you upgrade to the BuildX plugin, any of the version 0.10 versions, if you build and push those images, you can no longer pull them with containerd on Windows nodes. So right now, the guidance is to keep your BuildX or your BuildX plugin version at 0.9.1. And there is a mitigation if you've already updated. Where is that called out here? I don't know if that's called out here. If you've already updated your BuildKit version and you can't do this, there's an extra flag, which I will put in here and in the Slack or in the issue and in the chat, that you can make it so it will revert to the old behavior. But unfortunately, it's a new command line flag, so you can't add that to your build scripts and have it work across versions. Basically, there's been a whole bunch of work done to change how to put like SBOM and kind of attestation artifacts in a manifest list as a different OCI artifact type and publish that. And the way that those manifests were created were causing some issues where containerd couldn't actually pull the image because of the platform matching logic we have. So that's a bummer. There is a pull request open in containerd now to fix this, and this will get backported to containerd 1, the next minor release of 1, or the next patch release of 1.6, and it should go into 1.7, but this is still an open PR. So just be mindful of that. I will put that in here.
so can you explain how that what it was a bunch of optimizations that went in is the reason why
it wasn't a bunch of optimizations. There's a discussion in one of the issues which I don't have here. Let me type this here.
Okay.
And so previously, and my understanding of the issue is when you do like the Docker BuildX build call and you tell it to push to, and you tell it that the output type is registry, it would push a Docker, I think I have it called out here. It would push a, did I? Yeah, so it would push an artifact with a type of docker.container image. So just a single image, not a manifest list. And this had no platform matching logic on the this had no like OS or version or architecture image or data on the container image. So part of containerd, in order to help people make sure that they're using the right version of the Windows Server containers on the right OS host, has this platform matching logic, where if your image has an OS of Windows and an architecture of AMD64, it should have an OS version, and that OS version and containerd checks that the OS version will match what the host is running on. And if it's a manifest list, containerd will look and pull the correct image out of that manifest list, so you can have that multi-arch, image, and have a Windows Server 2019 and Windows Server 22 image in there. Well, with Docker, within updates to BuildKit, they're always pushing a manifest list now of type OCI image index, and the OCI image index is putting in the OS equals Windows and the architecture equals AMD64, but no OS version on there. And that's causing the existing platform matching logic in containerd to never be able to pull the image, because it says, I found something that matches the OS and the host, or the OS and the architecture, but we don't have a matching version. So I guess what we were doing with the host process containers, where we were always publishing as a because we could publish one image as a single and have it run on all of the different versions of Windows, we were okay not doing a manifest list. So that was kind of maybe like optional undocumented behavior, but things broke. So I think there's some changes that are going to make it go back to the old behavior, but those aren't released yet. So for now, just use old versions of build kit or add that -- provenance equals none in the calls or to your calls.
Okay, cool. And that's all written in the issue. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks.
And Mark, you'll see this issue if you are also using like, I don't know, cryctl to pull the images.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, cryctl just talks to like containerd over the CRI plugin rather than the whatever like CTR exit does. And yeah, you'll see this in the kubelet. I think it manifests as slightly different. If you use like ctr.exe, it'll say you'll see there's no match in platform for manifest. And if you're using the kubelet or cryctl, you'll see the same thing. You'll see this pull image from image service failed to pull an unpeg image, blah, blah, blah. No match for platform and manifest. So this is, yeah, a little bit ugly and hard to diagnose, but the Moby community and the BuildX folks and containerd were pretty responsive, and which is good. All right, and Jay, you came late, but I already announced the Arvind being coming on as a chair. And I know we
Oh yeah, welcome, Arvind. It's great, man. Thanks for everything that you do to keep us from going out of business over here. This is, yeah, you're always helping. You're always
Thanks,
helping
Jay.
us to keep our heads above water. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. Happy to help out.
Okay, Arvind, did you want to talk a little bit about the outcome of the SIG-Arch discussion?
Yeah, sure. So we had a fairly lengthy back and forth discussion during the SIG-Arch call. The main participants, I guess, was Tim Hawkin, Jordan Liggett, Derek Carr, Mark Rafos, and me, where I think most of the primary people that chimed in. It basically boiled down to we are going back to doing what we do in OpenShift. So when I first started on the KEP, the first thing they said is you need an API for this. So there was a lot of back and forth about whether this needs to be a core API or a V1 Alpha API. And then Jordan said, no, you need to make this a core API. And then he said, you need to go through API server. You can't just use the proxy endpoint. But because of, I think, future-facing security concerns and the amount of surface area that you'll be exposing by doing varlog through kubelet and kubectl, Jordan's mind now is saying, like, what he basically said is go back, let's not have an API. This is not supportable by us from an API standpoint, but rather, given that we already have this, varlog is exposed to the proxy, he's saying adding more stuff there is not that bad. It's not going to make it worse from what it's already there. The addition is we would disable this by default and not use a Kube API server at all. Just use the proxy endpoint. Everything will live inside kubelet and kubectl. And in some ways it's simpler, but it means that I have to rework this fully to make it look like, so it's basically a full rewrite at this point, as far as the plumbing goes. And I have to move a lot of the validations, like it was all inside like where the API validation was happening. I now need to move that into, I think, where either inside the kubelet or inside kubectl, or split it in two places. I also need to not use an API. So it means that I have to sort of construct what that URL will look like inside kubectl, and then it'll be picked up inside kubelet over the proxy endpoint. So that was the outcome of this, and I've started working on it. It's a little bit tricky because there are some basic differences between how the OpenShift command line OC works from kubectl, but it should be doable, is what I'm hoping. And I'm
It's a
planning
little
to
bit
get this
tricky
in.
because you have to rewrite your entire the entire thing.
The whole API, like
Yeah, I
objects.
wouldn't say rewrite the entire thing. It's like, it's kind of like hack and slash, move things around.
This is great though. You got the feature in. This is awesome.
no,
Yeah,
no.
Tim, or,
I will believe it when it merges, Jay.
I do remember you asking Jordan pretty candidly and said, if we do these changes, are you going to change your mind again? Or like essentially, like, are we okay with these? No more back and forth and everything. And they did say that, yes, that should be fine. And Derek also agreed from Node that.
Yeah.
This
So
would be okay.
hopefully this is the last hurdle, but who knows? But my aim is, this is my number one priority. So I might not help out in other areas. It's my number one priority. I'm trying to get this in before code freeze. So I have a month. I should be able to do it, hopefully, unless I run into some strange issues. But I have help from Mache also on the CLI side.
Okay.
So I should be help, as in like he said he'll review and help us get this through. So we should be good. Is my hope. Any questions, folks?
No, that's great. This is great. Thanks for doing this. It's really quite an adventure you've been on. I didn't think it would work out this way, so I didn't think it would be. I mean, I hate to say it's like, I don't mean to say easy, but I didn't think that conversation would be have any conclusion to it. So I'm really, that's great.
Yeah, I did push for getting to a conclusion. I was afraid at some point that it was just going to like go back to doing everything async and it would take forever. But I think it was everybody, I think, sort of came together and made sure it would, the conclusion
I was
was
kind of excited because I was like, maybe that gives us an excuse to move the kubelet out of tree someday, but like,
I don't think
that's a lot of work, Jay.
but whatever. Yeah. Okay.
That's not as easy as I think. Not that KPNG is easy, but I'm saying kubelet is at a different like level of complexity. Even like we would have to do a lot of cherry picking constantly. So
yeah, I mean,
I think
it would have been a fun conversation to have, though.
Yeah, I think what might even help is to have like clearly defined like sub architectures inside the kubelet. Maybe that could be an approach that's clearly owned by like Windows versus rest of the kubelet. That might even help, but I don't know whether we want to go all the way to doing it on our own. Of course, Michael is saying, yeah, no one is saying you can't write your own. Yes, of course we can write our own.
Nope.
Yeah, no, yeah.
We'll write it in Rust or C#.
Yeah, kubelet's got so much logic that was carried over from the early days where it had to do everything. And it's a weird, it's a lot like the kube proxy, right? But you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Arvind.
Yeah.
No problem. Happy to help.
Cool. I think that's the end of the agenda. Does anybody have anything else, or we can stop the meeting and do pairing for a bit?
I don't really have anything else. Me and Damon kind of got up and running with some Azure stuff, and we hit some account issues. I'm fixing those up, and then we'll hopefully have a deployment of your HackMD. I added a bunch of sort of details for people that are newer to the cluster API stuff to it.
Okay.
Do you want to, where is that gonna live, that HackMD? Like, do you think it'll die, or do you think we should put it in
probably SIG-Windows testing, maybe?
Okay.
The Windows testing repository.
Okay, cool. All right, so now I know what to do with it. All right, cool. I'll take the HackMD and I might add more details to it.
I can add it to the repository once. For folks that aren't aware of what we're talking about. I think there's some stuff in Slack, but Jay's helping to set up some CI testing or like a persistent environment to run some CI stuff that is running KPNG, and we're using cluster API or CapZ to set that up. Because that's what that's what most of the SIG-Windows tests use. So
I'm sort of being the middleman of Mark made a recipe and I'm onboarding Damon and showing him how it works. And then, but hopefully, yeah, we'll have a developer environment there. There's one other deep thing that I wanted to update folks, which is that, so I was hanging out with Pramita Monday, and we were sitting there and we're like, okay, so the Vagrant AWS provider is deprecated. The Vagrant Azure provider is deprecated. There's no more Vagrant, it looks like. And so I'm trying to figure out like what happened. Like I feel like I'm waking up. I feel like Captain America or something waking up in the iceberg. And I'm like, how do people do virtual machines now? Like what's the deal? So we're like, is everybody just starting to just use Terraform for everything now? Is that the way people spin up developer environments with virtual machines? And if so, it's like, if I'm looking at where we want to be for dev tools in 6 months or 3 months, it's something like, is it Terraform recipes? And it's like we could go one of two roads. We could go down the immutable images route, and Arvind has brought this up before. We could go down the immutable images route and really embrace CAPI, or we could go down the Terraform route. And it's like we're at a fork in the road because Vagrant just isn't going to do anything other than VirtualBox. And that's just not enough because we want to support Windows developers, you know what I mean? And so, like, obviously, so I just don't know what to do. Like, we can do either one of those, and either one of those is going to be a really exciting and fun project, and it's going to be something that we can get new people to own. And so one, I'm looking for owners. If somebody wants to own, and as usual, we got plenty of ideas. The question is, after that, what do we want to do? Do we think we can do all of this with Cluster API? Do we go off and build a CAPI VirtualBox provider, and do something where we glue things together through a kind thing? Because I love this stuff that Mark's got that builds dev clusters with a custom kube proxy in CapZ. It's super useful. And so I need
but
somebody
you need access to the cloud.
I need somebody to have an opinion here and tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna flip a coin.
Yeah, I think the CapZ route using Azure might be a problem for, I mean, it costs money, right? Like that itself is a hindrance.
Well, it's not, I didn't mean to say Azure. I mean to say, do we go the Cluster API road and see what we can do? Or do we do something else?
But Cluster API, I thought, would mean that you need a cloud of some sort, right? If
Yeah,
it's
we
not
may have
Azure.
to build a Cluster API VirtualBox.
Yeah, you can
Well,
do like a local, which
That's not a good idea.
that's
Yeah.
I agree with I mean.
So do we want to do a set of Terraform? Do we want to do some kind of a Terraform thing? And if so, is there a declarative developer centric idiom for Terraform that people follow that's like Vagrant? That's not so low level. And does Terraform support a local story with VMware Fusion or QEMU or any of this shit? Because Vagrant doesn't support QEMU. And what's that, Mark?
I was just wondering if Terraform. I've only ever used I think that there's a
VirtualBox provider, but I'm afraid it's going to be another thing like QEMU provider. It's going to be another thing where it kind of works, but not really.
But Jay, we have to go away from VirtualBox, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I'm not sure who is right.
Wait.
What
Is it
problem
me?
are you trying to solve with Terraform?
Yeah, I think it's
That-
I'm muted. I mean, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I lost my train of thought. But what I was trying to say is we can't use VirtualBox, right? There are all kinds of licensing issues with VirtualBox.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to
We
do
know
something
that, but what are
new-
we gonna do? Are we gonna go terraform?
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is if we are going to Terraform or if we are going to, I don't know, something else, we shouldn't be picking VirtualBox as the starting point.
What's the free starting? So what can we do for QEMU?
Yeah, see, the difficulty that we are facing is we are trying to come up with a solution that's generic across Linux, Windows, and the Mac and Mac.
Yeah.
For deploying
That's-
Windows virtual machines.
Oh, what is that?
For
Mark?
deploying Windows virtual machines.
Yeah.
Which is the tricky part.
Yeah. So that's where that issue comes in, right? Like I remember like we were talking about like using even kind and having Windows running inside a container. That even might be possible on a Windows box, but like good luck trying to run a Windows container on a Linux box. It's going to take a lot of work.
So I mean, Terraform's the thing that's the most flexible. Does it have any local story though?
Yeah, we'd have to
It
investigate that. I don't know of the.
looks like there is a libvirt provider that you can point it at a local QEMU at local QEMU endpoints. But this is just me searching in like the 3 minutes we've had the call.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I almost think that the other tack we can use is we put the onus on the user to bring up the VMs. And we start from the point where the VMs are up, the Linux VM and the Windows VM is up, and then we do something. That's the other approach that we can do.
So the user goes, clicks around in VirtualBox or in Hyper-V,
Yeah,
and then we say you just make a YAML file with SSH. Oh gosh, so I have to set up my
Yeah.
SSH keys. I think,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think I want to contribute to SIG-Windows if that's the developer story you give me.
I mean,
I think you're going to
I'm
be
not
the
saying-
only person to ever write another feature.
No, I'm just saying, I'm just throwing out options, right? Like, that is I think in many ways,
You'd have
the
to
worst
bribe.
option.
You're going to have to come to my house and buy me a steak. You're not going to be able to convince me over Zoom. You're going to have to
Fair
take me
enough,
out to
Jay.
dinner like it's one of those like it's a big deal.
Like what they do in academia, wine and
Yeah, you're going to
dine
have to buy me a
people
bottle
to
of
hire
wine.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just saying it's an option. I'm not saying we should do it. I'm just saying it's an option.
I don't know what to do, but you're right. This is tricky. Okay. So I need help figuring out what we want this story to be. If anybody's got an idea that they think will work, just let me know because I think the default route is going to be Terraform and it's going to sort of evolve into a set of loosely coupled Terraform type recipes. Something like that. Unless there's a VMware solution, right? Like maybe you can do VMware work, and I'm not saying this because I work at VMware, but like maybe you can do something with VMware Workstation or Fusion, which are free. What do you think about that, Arvind? Would you think the diehard Linux folks would use that? Does that stuff work on
It does
Ubuntu
work
and
on.
stuff? Yeah.
It does work on Linux. I don't know about the diehard folks on Linux. They would just want to use KVM, is what I'm thinking.
Does it work on Macs too?
Yeah,
It
Yeah,
definitely will work on Macs, right?
and there are no licensing issues, Jay, with using Workstation, or I know that there are restrictions.
It's VMware Workstation. Fusion is free for Macs. I think Workstation is free.
I remember having to buy licenses for this because there was a while where you could do nested on VMware, and KVM did not have good nested support. So I remember
Workstation Player is a platform for running a single virtual machine on Windows. Okay, that's not useful.
That's not going to work. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can reach an agreement here, Jay. Let's take it maybe offline, async, and try and figure this out. But I mean, Terraform is well used everywhere. So if they have a good local option,
Yeah.
It
Okay.
looks like, yeah, I mean, there's a like the KVM or QEMU story looks promising.
Yeah, so I see some questions on the chat from Andy. What type of things are you trying to run with Terraform? I think what we're trying to do is just bring up a Windows instance, set up some kind of transport SSH or WinRM, and then try and configure the Windows box to become a Windows node and do something similar for
Yeah.
Linux.
The SIG-Windows dev tools, Andy, the repo, what it does is you go in, you clone it down, you run make all, and it gives you a Kubernetes cluster potentially built from source on your laptop. And you don't have to pay any money for it. So it means that people can contribute to, you know, people that don't work at FANG can all over the world can contribute without an internet connection, without a cloud account. We want SIG-Windows dev tools to work for people and who don't have Mac computers and don't have Linux computers. And right now we just don't have a solution, a way for people to spin up Windows Kubernetes clusters from source, unless they have a cloud account or unless they have VirtualBox. So yeah.
And your second question, Andy, is are the images hosted anywhere? I think at the moment there's that Vagrant repository that we were using. I think Amin was posting, pushing images over there.
Yeah, we have a base Vagrant box that's pushed off into the cloud that none of us remember how to build. That Friedrich originally built it, and then Amin modified it.
Yeah, Amin knows how to build it. I don't.
Amin now knows, yeah.
I've tried it and I was like, oh my god, this is not working on my Linux box.
Yeah.
But Amin knows how to do it.
So, and then Amin did an experiment with Image Builder where he actually built an OVA that would actually spin up, and we have that in the experiments directory too. So yeah.
Hey, folks, I've got to drop for SIG node now, but Jay, I'm gonna make you lead. You can stop the recording.
That's fine,
whenever you're done with this.
Yeah, cool.
And Andy's next question is, can you do this with Hyper-V? Hyper-V is not an option for us in some sense because we want to do something consistent across Linux, Mac, and Windows, which is why we are trying to do QEMU, which we can run in all the three places.
Well, here's a question for you, Arvind. I mean, you kind of hinted at this. Like, what if we just did something where we curated a Hyper-V recipe and we curated a QEMU recipe, and maybe they're scripts, and maybe that's fine. You think that's doable? Like, is Hyper-V scriptable in a reasonable way?
I have not used Hyper-V at all to be.
Andy, do you know?
I've only done a little bit with Hyper-V recently, but effectively you can.
Would you be willing to like research that and tell us next week, like whether you think it's something you could script to build a Linux and a Windows VM and run a Bootstrap script on there?
I mean, Jay, are you asking if Hyper-V has APIs that you can use to?
Well, everything's got an API, but I mean, can we actually, go finish what you were saying, Andy, and then yeah.
I've only been recently playing with Hyper-V, but what I had been doing was I used PowerShell to manipulate Hyper-V on a host. And then the reason I was asking about the images themselves is that effectively you can build the image that you want to run, and then you can run that within Hyper-V. I haven't tried it with a Linux image though. I've only done it with the Windows one.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know how often, Andy, I never met, nice to meet you, by the way. I don't know how often you come to the SIG meetings, but if you're going to be here next week and you've got like an hour or so, do you feel like fleshing this idea out is something you might be able to do for us, just to give us some seed of a possible idea to follow around this theme that you've come up with?
Sure. I guess maybe what would be helpful is if I don't actually know what you're trying to do with the dev setup thing.
Can I show you now?
Sure.
Okay. I'll show you right now. here we go. This, folks,
All
the
right, Jay,
the
I
official
need to-
meeting is, yeah.
I need to drop. If you need anything from me, just ping me on Slack and I'll respond.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Arvind.
right.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
folks.
Hey Jay,
Okay,
drop the recording and turn this into after hours.
happy, okay, it's happy after hours, whatever we call it. Stop.